Hello there, it's Mark with Octane Auto Tips. Welcome back to Pro Auto Repair. Today, got a pretty fine specimen. It's a 2005 Nissan Xterra. It's got a 4-liter V6. It is 4x4, and it is the off-road model. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Xterras. I was a bigger fan of the old Pathfinder that they have thankfully brought back, but during the interim we were left with this Xterra by Nissan. First generation was pretty horrible in my humble opinion. They had a lot of issues, especially overheating issues and cooling issues. But anyway, this is a pretty good specimen of an Xterra. In fact, if I were to buy an Xterra, this would probably be it. I even like the color. But anyway, this client brought this vehicle to us a couple of weeks back, describing symptoms of, I think he said he was on the highway in 5th or 6th gear, and as he was going up a hill with the cruise control on, the RPMs began to climb, but his speed began to decrease, and that kind of said to me, clutch is going out. Now, I did a little test a couple weeks ago, which I'll redo here in a few minutes, on how to diagnose a failing clutch, and it didn't really fail the test, but it really didn't pass the test either. And we told him he had limited lifetime on this clutch, and I believe that was a little before Thanksgiving, so we'll call it about 3 weeks ago, maybe a little bit more. And in that interim, I guess it's just finally gone out. I'm not quite sure how he was able to drive it here last night, but when we pulled it into the shop last night, yeah, it kind of required me pushing as Daniel was driving. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun. It's a bit of an arduous process in this beast. I'm pretty sure, the front prop shaft, front differential might need to come down. Definitely the catalytic converters will need to come down. But in any case, we'll get cracking here in a little bit after I top off my coffee. So now, here I am inside the vehicle. First order of business would be to start the car. First thing you want to make sure of, e-brake, parking brake is firmly depressed. Last thing I want to do is drive into my computer over there. And then what we're going to do is select a gear. I recommend a high gear, so clutch down. I'm going to go into 5th. And then basically you just want to, I don't know if you can see my feet down there, but just kind of pop your foot off the clutch pedal. Alright, my feet are not on the pedals. The car is in gear, and as you can see, the engine is still on. We have not driven into that wall. This clutch is beyond gone, totally gone. So in fact, even if I give it some gas, it's still not trying to move forward. This thing is done. So there you go. That is just a quick way to diagnose a failing or failed clutch, because clearly if this clutch was good, putting it into gear and dumping said clutch would have caused the car to shut down. The engine would have cut off. It would have stalled, and that did not happen. So time for us to do a clutch job. Well, here we are under the vehicle, under the Xterra. Just kind of doing a little once over, see what exactly we have in store for us today. Won't be the hugest pain in the world, but it sure as hell isn't going to be easy. It's a slave cylinder for the clutch. I mean, clearly that'll come down, but that's pretty easy. My presumption that the front differential will have to come down doesn't look like it's going to be true. That differential can stay in place, but of course the front prop shaft will have to come down, as well as the exhaust segments. At least these front catalytic converters will have to come down. Maybe not that one, but definitely that one, because clearly that transmission coming back will bump into it, and that might hinder our progress. Of course, rear prop shaft is going to have to come down. The guard and the mounting bracket for the transmission will have to come down, and I'm just now noticing how monstrous this transmission is. It starts right here and goes all the way back to here. Now, given that also incorporates the transfer case, which sends power up to the front wheels and the rear wheels when told to do so, but that's going to be heavy. That's going to be very, very heavy. So it should be fun, and like all transmissions, another challenging prospect will be the top 2, 3, maybe 4 bolts up there that bolt it to the engine. They're usually a bit tricky, and looks like they will continue to be tricky. There's not a lot of room there, but we'll get cracking here in a little bit, and so stay tuned. We are a short while later, and as you can see, only a couple things missing. I removed both the rear and the front prop shaft, as well as the skid plate. One little thing about removing prop shafts, drive shafts, whatever you want to call them, they are balanced, so you want to make sure to mark them where they have been sitting. I didn't mark these. These were actually marked, I guess, from the factory, but you can see little white marks on all of the on both of the prop shafts, as well as where they bolt to at the differentials and at the transfer case. So, yeah, next order of business will probably be those catalytic converters. Yay. Okay, we're back. Slight change of plans. Not dropping the exhaust first. Had to bring the car down to get some information off of it to order the parts. And since it was down on the ground before going back up with it, I figured now would be a pretty good time to just go ahead and remove the shifter from the transmission, since we're going to have to do that anyway, so better get on it now. Now the handle of your shifter is pretty easy to get off. Most of them just thread off, so lefty loosey. Alright, cool, got that. Now this interior section should just pop off. There goes half of it. Here come the cup holders. And voila. And this is what we're left with. And down in here is where I'm going to want to take apart. Alright, now we can see down in here that this plate is held by 4 10mm bolts around the perimeter, although one of them is a little obstructed due to the bracket that is holding that little bit of wiring, so that bracket's going to need to come up first. That also looks like it's a 10mm bolt right down in that little nook. Alright, now the wiring is out of the way. Should be able to get to these other 10mm now. Alrighty. Now it looks like we have some breather hoses for the transmission, but what I'm after is on the other side of this boot. So I'm going to go ahead and snip off these zip ties and then pull the boot up, or oh wait, look at that. I don't have to snap off the zip ties just yet. And, ooh, yay, more 10mm bolts. Now in front-wheel drive cars, where the transmission is under the hood, or in transaxle cars, where the transmission / differential, known as a transaxle, is at the back of the car, like it is in mine, you have shift linkage, which are a series of arms and joints that run from the bottom of the shifter to the transmission. But in this car, like most manual transmissions, especially manual transmission trucks and SUVs, there's no need for a linkage because the transmission is quite literally under the center console. And you can see down there is your transmission, and that little circular opening is where the ball on the bottom of the shifter fit into. So the only other thing I'm going to take out of here is this spring. I'm just going to sit it down here on the floor, on that weatherproof floor mat, so as to not gunk up the car. Okay, the shifter is out, so now when the time comes for us to drop the transmission can be dropped without yanking a chunk of the interior of the car with it. Yay. Alright, so an executive decision has been made on the exhaust. Clearly this segment here is going to have to come down and out of the way to be able to get the transmission and transfer case out. But we removed the heat shield from this catalytic converter. Should give us enough space to come back with the transmission. This one is fine. Other than that, you can see the starter is out. The slave cylinder has also been removed. And yeah, we're just getting some of those bolts now, and then we'll move on to this beast back here. Looks like we need a breaker bar. Nice. So we just removed the entire exhaust segment from the catalytic converter's back. Hence the term catback. That would be your catback exhaust. Yeah, so there are two bolts holding the engine. The transmission to the engine. And there are also a few bolts holding the transmission to the car. And that's what we'll be working on right now. Let's see if we can get a good view. And there goes the main support for the transmission transfer case. And there you see the transmission is now being suspended via the transfer case and the jack. So slowly bringing it down. Yeah. Yeah. Next order on the shopping list, transmission jack. Well, we thought we had enough clearance after removing the heat shield from the catalytic converter, but that is proving not to be the case. Sometimes we make mistakes. We're human. "20 minutes later, the cat's out of the bag. Haha. Now, this should prove to be a lot easier. Lower it. The input shaft is clear.
So if you can go at the back and jack this up. Down. Alright, that's enough.
Hands down. Oh. Holy shnikes. Whew. Well, it's a beast of a transmission, as we said before. You can tell by the size of it. And here's the old clutch disc and pressure plate. Pop that off here in a bit. Alright, back to it. We're still at it, I guess I should say. Clearly there is something missing here. It's the back side of the engine. Most people don't get a chance to see that. This is clearly where the transmission bolts to, around the perimeter. The flywheel, as well as the clutch disc and pressure plate, was all bolted on here, now sitting over there on the ground. Got those down. One thing I like to just examine, this is what's known as a rear main seal. I'm sure some of you out there have been told in the past that your rear main seal is leaking oil, and that does happen as time goes on. Basically, that's a rear seal for the engine. This is the butt end of the crankshaft, and basically that keeps the oil in there lubricating the crankshaft and stops it from coming out and leaking from the car. A good telltale sign if your rear main seal is leaking. There's a little bit of oil will tend to build up here where the engine meets the transmission. But anytime we do a clutch job or a transmission replacement, anytime the transmission comes down, we examine that rear main seal, look for any sign of leakage, which this does not have, clearly, which is good, very good for him. Basically, if he was leaking oil from his rear main seal, this would be an excellent time to change that out. I wouldn't charge any additional labor to pop that seal off and put a new one in place. It would literally take 7 to 10 minutes. Not too bad, but this case, we don't need to do it. We don't need to do it at all. Something to think about when he goes another 100,000+ miles with this new clutch we're putting in place. I'm sure next time he does a clutch job, that will probably be leaking a little bit of oil. But we did run into some problems. Before I get to the problem, let's just take a quick look. This is your clutch disc. This is the frictional surface that rests between the flywheel, which is bolted to the engine, and the pressure plate. And these splines here go over the input shaft of the transmission, which is right here. This is your input shaft right here to your transmission. This spins. I mean, clearly nothing's spinning now because it's a neutral, but if it was in gear, this would spin, and it would spin the output shaft. This right here is what's known as a release bearing, throw-out bearing. I've heard the term shift bearing or thrust bearing before. I call it a release bearing, because basically what you're doing when you push in your clutch pedal, you're releasing the clutch, allowing you to go from one gear into the next. Here's your pressure plate, the old pressure plate, and you can see all that discoloration is all scorning. It's become very, very hot. I'm sure as this clutch has kind of just disappeared and become nothing, it's just really heated up the inside of that pressure plate. So inside this clutch kit box, which it is an Xterra clutch, which is original to the car. This is an Xterra clutch. We only use OE quality parts, or original equipment quality parts here at Pro Auto Repair. It's not always the cheapest when it comes to parts, but you do get the best part quality imaginable for your vehicle. It's definitely the best way to go. Cheaper is not always better. I'm sure most people know that. So yeah, this kit comes with a new clutch disc, a new pressure plate. It'll come with a new release bearing, and a new pilot bearing. Problem that we ran into is normally when we do a clutch job, we take the flywheel to the machine shop and have them resurface this surface of the flywheel to make sure to get rid of all this scoring and make sure it's a nice, smooth, even surface, so that way the clutch won't produce any chatter, any noise, won't get any vibration, and you'll get nice, smooth shifts. Problem is, and we didn't know that until we dropped this beast, this is what's known as a dual mass flywheel. I mean, technically it's 3 masses, but that third mass, this plate on the very bottom by my pinky, is just a plate for the crankshaft position sensor, which is mounted between the engine and the transmission to let the computer know at what position the crankshaft is at. But the dual mass comes into play. One is the flywheel back here, and this piece here is what makes it dual mass. Now, dual mass flywheels, I've seen them in smaller vehicles before, which always makes me go, wow, that's kind of silly. I do understand them in larger vehicles, because basically what a dual mass flywheel is doing with this little bit of play in it is it's allowing you to get a smoother shift or a smoother start off the line getting into first gear. I'm sure you've driven, if anybody's driven older trucks that don't have dual mass flywheels, they're normally kind of bumpy and shaky right off the bat once you get into first gear. The problem with dual mass flywheels is you cannot resurface a dual mass flywheel. Basically, there's a little bit of play in here which allows it to wobble. I don't know if you can see the wobble, but it allows it to wobble side to side as well as rotate side to side. And in order to resurface this, if this were put on a lathe to be resurfaced, as pressure's being pressed here, it's going to raise this side up, so you're not going to be able to get a nice, smooth, uniform finish on your flywheel. So that leaves us with 2 options. One is put this back into place, and 2 is to replace this entire assembly, which is a little over $500. Not cheap, but it's the route we're going to take. I wouldn't want to put this back into place. In fact, this has a little bit more play than I'm comfortable with. And unless I'm directed to by the client who just doesn't want to replace this, I would not put this back into place, because odds are if we were to put this back into place with the new clutch kit, you're going to get some chatter from the clutch, some noise from the clutch, maybe even some vibration in the clutch pedal, and I'm pretty sure it would also decrease the life expectancy of said clutch, whereas that clutch kit should last at least another 120,000 miles, depending, of course, on the person driving. If you're not very proficient at driving a manual transmission and you ride that clutch, you could burn out a brand new clutch kit in a hell of a lot less time than 120,000 miles. But that should last at least another 120,000 miles. And if we weren't to replace this, then that would, decrease the life expectancy of that clutch kit. So I explained all this to the client. Let him know that we can go ahead and replace this for him, and he chose to do that, which is very smart in my humble opinion. If this was my vehicle, I would do the exact same thing. This is a loop flywheel. It's probably why it's so darn expensive, but it is what it is. That's the first problem we ran into. The second problem we ran into is that flywheel is a special order item. That's right. Means I can't get it until Friday. Today is Wednesday. Well, Wednesday's almost over, but it's still Wednesday, meaning it's going to take a couple days for us to get it, which is why I've gone ahead and moved the transmission, which is a monstrosity of a transmission. This flashlight is about 18 inches long, so you can see just how long that transmission is. It's well over 4 feet long. It's ridiculous. Beast of a transmission. That's why the transmission's been scooted over here to the side. The rest of the stuff that we had taken off, including the exhaust components, prop shafts, and whatnot, has all been tucked to the side, and I've gone ahead and taken this wiring harness and just zip-tied it into place so that way it won't drag. Because basically what we'll do tomorrow morning, we'll keep it safe and sound here inside the shop tonight, but tomorrow morning when we open up, we'll have some more work to do, so we'll just bring that girl down, push it outside, and then push it back inside once tomorrow's business is done. Not looking forward to it. That thing is heavy. Very, very heavy. But that's where we stand, and it'll take a couple days before I continue this video, but for you, thanks to editing, it'll only take a few seconds. So, see you soon. Oh, it's a new morning. In fact, it's 2 mornings later. It's Friday morning. Kind of late in the morning. We've been open for a little while doing some work to this Volkswagen Passat. Timing belt, water pump, engine mounts, reseal the oil pan, and also while we were down there we went ahead and cleaned out the sump screen. It was a little nasty. In any case, here's the transmission. You may have heard one of us, if not both of us, cursing when we were dropping this transmission from the Xterra, saying we need a transmission jack. So we made an executive decision after removing this beast and how long it took, just go and finally get one. We've muddled through over the last few years without one, mainly because we do a lot of either front wheel drive or rear wheel drive vehicles. We've done a few 4x4s, but this is the biggest transmission we've dropped to date, especially with that beast of a transfer case on the back. But anyway, here's the transmission. We're still waiting for that flywheel to arrive. Should arrive before 1 p.m., which means we'll have to bust our asses to get this done by 6 p.m. Next step for me, once the cleaner arrives, is to go and just clean up all this nastiness that you can see down there. I don't have gloves on, so I don't want to really touch it too much. Let's see if the camera can hear this. It's a good thing we're doing the clutch. That release bearing, the throwout bearing, is not really sounding too healthy. So, yeah, waiting on that to get here. Parts. Waiting on a camshaft seal for that bad boy, and we've got a Toyota Sienna outside that needs valve cover gaskets and spark plugs. Strange. It's the third Toyota this week we're doing valve cover gaskets and spark plugs on that 3-liter. Wonder if that means anything. Anyway, back to it in a little bit. Now that looks much cleaner. Much cleaner. I'm not going to say that it's as clean as it was when it was new, but it's clean. Also went ahead and replaced the release bearing, throwout bearing, whatever you want to call it. Needed to be pressed into its pin. And of course, re-greased where it mounts to the input shaft of the transmission. Nice and smooth. More importantly, it's quiet. Yay. Still waiting for that flywheel to get here. Hopefully it won't take too much longer. Alright, well, so much for flywheel arriving on Friday. Here we are Monday morning. Flywheel is in place along with the new clutch disc and pressure plate. So that's all in, that's all good to go. Transmission has been mounted and bolted to the engine. I also just went ahead and took care of all the transmission electronics, which there are a lot. That's part of my beef with modern day 4x4s, is that they're very electronically dependent. Even if something as simple as switching it from 2-wheel drive to 4-wheel drive is all electronically controlled via this bad boy here. And I feel like that just, as time goes on, they won't prove to be the best off-road vehicles through the long haul. So, got all the electrics in place. Next step, I believe, will be getting the exhaust system in place, or possibly this bottom transmission mount. Regardless, let's get to it and check back here in a bit. Okay, here we are a little while later. You can see a few things are on A. I went ahead and put this slave cylinder into place. The starter motor is in place, as well as the heat shield around it. All the electrics are connected, bolted in tight, bolted in tight. Also went ahead and put in this catalytic converter here. We got 2 of the bolts tight, 2 of the 3 that hold it in. The third one's kind of hard to reach from up here, so when we bring the car down to put on the remainder of stuff that we had to go inside this wheel well to get to, that is when that will be put back into place and tight. One thing, since we're on the topic of exhaust, when we put our exhaust back together, we like to use some of this good stuff. It's kind of dirty, you can't really seal, but it's an anti-seize, anti-rust lubricant, just to make things a little easier further down the road for the next person, whether it's us or someone else, whoever's going to wind up taking off a segment of exhaust. They won't have to worry about bolts breaking or anything along those lines, hopefully. Okay, so next order of business will be this big bracket right here. That bad boy is right here and kind of mounts the transmission to the frame of the car. So yeah, that's next. Alright, well, it's beginning to look like the underside of a vehicle again. As you can see, went ahead and got that bracket in place to mount to the back of the transmission. Also, the rest of the exhaust system is in place, tight, mounted and tight, mounted and tight. So yeah, making pretty good progress. I am satisfied. Next step will be the prop shafts, front and rear, and then we'll bring the car down, pop this wheel off, go ahead and take care of that O2 sensor that's up there, the heat shield that goes up there, and then of course the undercarriage that goes in the wheel well, and then finally go inside the vehicle, put together that shifter and whatnot that I took off at the beginning of this, and yeah, so making good progress, getting there. Alright, now as you can see, I've gone ahead and put these on. I also made sure to align them. Like I said before, if they're not marked, make sure to mark your prop shafts before taking them down and putting them up. They are balanced pieces of equipment and you'd like to continue that balance. So front prop shaft is on. It's clearly not tight. My fingers aren't strong enough to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put the rear in place, and then go ahead and tighten them all at once. Again, balanced, so make sure to get it right. Should be there. This is something you want to make sure is good and tight. Don't make it too tight, but it's also not something that you want loose. So I like to take a screwdriver or a pry bar, wedge it up against something stationary like that exhaust, and then I'll also go ahead and extend my wrench a little bit longer. Gives me more leverage. More leverage means it's going on tighter. So those four are good. Wunderbar. Now we just work on this back one. Alright, now with these back ones, I'll just go ahead and take my gun. I'm going to turn this down to one of the lower settings, because these are not the biggest bolts in the world. Won't want to go too tight. Alright, cool. So, prop shafts are in, which is definitely good. Just about time to bring it down, with one major exception. This little skid plate here goes up right over there. Pretty sure it covers over the transfer case. That will need to go in. So that, and then good to go, bring it down. And there you have it. Time to bring it down, take that wheel off, put in the O2 sensors, heat shield, and whatnot. So let's do it. Always thread it in before plugging it in, because otherwise these wires are going to get kinked, and it might stop it from functioning. And with O2 sensors, you just want them to be snug. Do not make them too tight. Strip out those threads, or make life a living hell when it comes to taking it off. Alright, well, I went ahead and cut the camera off as I was putting together the wheel well undercarriage, whatever we want to call it. The camera just kept getting in my way, mounted on my head. It was becoming a nuisance when I was putting in that O2 sensor and whatnot. And this kind of required me to brace it with my shoulder and put it into place, so I just cut the camera off. It's not the most difficult thing in the world to take off. It's held on by a bunch of little Phillips head screws and a couple of just plastic clips. So wheels back in place, getting ready to bring it down, go inside, attach the shifter and whatnot. Need to remember to put this back in his glove box for next time he goes for tires or a rotation. Yeah, they're not going to be able to get those wheels off. So here we go. Alright, well, it sounds like I'm cycling through gears, so that means I got it right. placement is everything. The last bolt. I'm always a fan of the last bolt. Yippee-ki-yay. One upside of the interior of most new vehicles is that so much plastic just kind of pops back into place. He probably wants that face in the right direction. Little H pattern, nice. Cool. Alright, say it's time for the moment of truth. Cool, I'm going to go ahead and let it warm up. Also check tire pressure since that light's on. Then take it for a road test. Alright, here we are to conclude. Just took it for a little road test, only a few miles, because 1 o'clock appointment showed up with the Toyota Tundra, so we got to knock that out. But it seemed to drive just fine. Takes off like a rocket ship. I'm going to have to warn him so he doesn't get any speeding tickets. But yeah, it's a good car, good clutch job, arduous clutch job, but it's finally done. I'll give it a thorough road test later on this afternoon, but it seems to be good. I'm impressed. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you liked, please click like. If you want to see more, click subscribe, so that that way it tells me to post more videos. And if you did not like, don't just click dislike. You can go ahead and click dislike, but you know, I like feedback. Tell me why you didn't dislike it, and I'll do my best to change it for the next one. So again, this is Mark with Octane Auto Tips, brought to you by Pro Auto Repair. Thanks for watching.